So let's talk about the second piece of Transformer news in relation to the Masterpiece line that comes courtesy of Figure King Magazine, volume 278, the late March edition that is showing up on the doorsteps of all the Japanese collectors as we speak right now. We learned about the Skids figure. We learned about the repaint that'll have some Diaclone origins. But let's talk about the two others that were mentioned here in a little bit of a teaser. One of them is some brand new exciting news, and another one is a little bit of an update on something that we learned all the way back in late 2019 before the big V kind of ruined the world. I think I'll start with that one first. So they give an update on what's been happening with Masterpiece Raiden. So back in late 2019, there was a Transformer display and expo where they had this big teaser image of the next Masterpiece being Raiden, the Trainbot combiner team from Headmasters era 1987. And there was just this huge thing where it's like, oh, more information will surface at this next expo that's going to be called, it was something called like the Trains in the Sky Expo, which was like a giant expo dedicated to all the different fictional interpretations of trains in Japanese culture. Trains are a big deal over there, just to remind everyone. And of course, the big V happened, kind of ruined the world, and all of those expos got canned, and we never found out what happened with Raiden. We never got that update. The most we got, oddly enough, was a third-party company came forward and showed that they were going to be making some kind of high-end Raiden third-party figure, and that was about it, which was kind of sad. You could actually look in the archives of the podcast. I talk about that. But what's interesting, what they mention here is it's going to be happening, and they say here that the size of the combiner will be similar to that of the United Warrior combiners. For people who aren't familiar, the United Warrior combiners were pretty much what was used for combiner wars. Now, here's where it gets kind of dicey. Does that mean that we're going to have deluxe-sized individual robots that'll make the final giant robot, and it'll be that general size where, the average combined combiner war robot is something that's like a little taller than, let's say, like a 12-inch kind of height. But the real question is because Combiner Wars and United Warrior in Japan also had that Devastator, the Titan class one. So it's something that I get a feeling the mention here of United Warrior is probably leaning more on that 12-inch scale deluxe combiners as opposed to the Titan class Devastator, which also, again, was part of United Warriors, and each of the individual robots was more of a Voyager scale, which led to a huge, giant combined figure. But it's kind of sad to hear that if that is the case, that it's going to be smaller, because when you think like of a Masterpiece scale combiner, you expect something that, I'm looking over at my Masterpiece display, and the largest Masterpiece that we have thus far in the Transformers lineup is Starsaber. And I would hope that it would be at least as tall as Starsaber, at least. So, if at least it gets that much, and if that's the case, then I really hope that each individual member of the Raiden Trainbot team gets some really good paint detail and articulation to make it worth its while. It's one of those unique characters in the sense that, number one, his original first release, the Diaclone one, is ridiculously difficult to get. You're talking difficult to get complete mint in box, difficult even complete loose, and you're spending easily between $1,000 to $1,500 in a loose complete one, $2,000 to $2,500 for a complete mint in box one. Then when you're talking pretty much they took that figure and they repacked it into the Headmasters line in 1987 in Japan, even that version is ridiculous to get, either complete or loose complete, in that same range of $500 to $1,000. So, and that was it for that character, more or less. There really wasn't another interpretation within Generation 1. Yeah, there's been a lot of train bots since then, whether it be Micromasters or JRX with car robots, robots in disguise, or Rail Racer, whatever he was called. But there really wasn't anything that was Raiden and his team and his members and that 1986 interpretation. So he's a very obscure character that hasn't had a lot of different figural forms, and it would be nice to finally get something, even that in a Masterpiece scale, that kind of really fits in more with, let's say, a Classics Universe Siege, whatever, the Chug as people called it, the Generation scale display. Again, I really hope that it's Star Saber sized or bigger. I mean, there's this classic old magazine pullout image from 1987 that showed how big Fortress Maximus was compared to all the other Autobots. And it was like they showed Fort Max, then they showed Metroplex, and then to show how big combiners were compared to Metroplex and Fort Max, they used Raiden, and then they used Chrome Dome to show how big Chrome Dome was to Raiden. And I'm going to post a little image of it too, that just cropped that out just to show you guys. And I mean, Raiden, Chrome Dome, that's supposed to be your standard Autobot car, in robot mode barely is able to touch Raiden's kneecap. So it's something where I expect him to be big. I really do. And it's sad because if you look at like the Autobot cars currently in the Masterpiece line, for Raiden to be that same kind of scale, he's going to have to be something similar to that of the United Warriors Combiner Wars Devastator. Maybe I'm just looking too much into it, but I really hope that he's bigger because of that Masterpiece, designation. The flip side of that will be he'll also be very expensive. So let's see what people really want. Do they want something that's more affordable and smaller, or something that's larger and more expensive, but it'll be more true to their display? Especially for something that's a really obscure character, what would be the demand on that? Sure, Japan might love it because of the train connection, but Western imports, that's a different story. The second one that was announced here was unexpected, and I'm actually a little surprised by the choice. Some would say too soon. But they say here that there's plans for a future Masterpiece Skyfire. And the choice of Japanese writing here is that of Skyfire, as he was called in Japan, and of course here in America in the animation. They don't call it Jetfire. So that means that we're probably going to be getting some animation-accurate Fliro Deary, Sunbow, Season 1, Fire in the Sky, Skyfire. Now, this is coming off of just 2 years, actually 2019, so almost 3 years coming up. But 2 years of coming off of Commander class Jetfire, which to me, I mean, I feel that it pretty much encapsulates the perfection of the animation model into a toy, and it being a Commander class also kind of encapsulates that scale that even a Masterpiece would probably emulate. So is it really necessary to do a Masterpiece Skyfire? How different would it be from what we already got in Siege? The only argument that I could give, really, is by the time this is engineered and released, let's say, like this announcement, let's say a year from now or 2 years from now, we finally get the figure. The only argument I could give is that by the time we reach that 2-year span and this figure comes out, this Masterpiece, it'll be 4 years since, or 5 years even, since the Siege Jetfire, and maybe the price of the Siege Jetfires will be so high to get mint in box complete that it'll justify getting a Masterpiece for a similar price. I mean, right now in the open market, a Siege Jetfire goes between $125 and $150 mint in box sealed. So if in 2 to 5 years that price raises to, let's say, $200 or even $250, what would a Masterpiece Skyfire be of a comparable nature? $300? I hope not. So again, that's something that's really interesting. Not to mention, clearly, Masterpieces are all about really getting that animation model. So they're not going to probably try to do anything bold and do some, Jetfire, Valkyrie, Macross, Robotech kind of head sculpts and stuff like that. I think they're going to really stay true to what has already been engineered with that of the original Siege Commander class, and maybe just try to clean it up, don't have the little spots on it for like the little blast accessories and stuff like that. I'm curious to see how they're going to go about that, because I still feel that's a little soon. Like, if you want to do Skyfire, I'm cool with that, but I would do it in like 7 years, 10 years from now. Really distance yourself from another large, beefy, expensive price point figure of the same character that practically already does a perfect animation model interpretation. So very interesting choice. Very interesting. Not one that I would pick personally. Very interesting. And again, he's probably also going to be equally as pricey, just because of his scale compared to his other Autobot counterparts. So let me know what you think about these two. It's very interesting to see this. Again, the Raiden one, nice to finally get an update. We still don't have any dates yet. No announcements of when this is going to come out. And the Jetfire was a blurb, so it's more just like, hey, this is, on the back burner. It's going to happen, just a matter of time. So let me know what you think about this. Very interesting stuff. And we still have one more piece of news to handle before all of this is done with Figure King magazine.